What's good, YouTube? Jason Lee here with Northwest Podcast. I want to talk about the emotion, what kind of emotion goes into love. And I want to talk about the biology of choosing a mate. So, when I talk to people, a lot of what a lot of the rhetoric that I hear coming against a lot of the things that I say is, where's your evidence for that? I hear that all the time. Um, there is no evidence that's science based. I mean, there's very little. I mean, there is. They have statistics on dating habits and statistics on marriage and statistics on sex and things like that. And those things are important to an extent, but some things are just innate. Some things that we just learn as we go, and we learn these things based on our experiences, and that's called empirical evidence. Okay. Which is a part of how scientists gather information and so they can make educated guesses or educated, um, you know, hypotheses about things. And, one of the things that I realize about life and that other people need to realize about life, particularly people that I talk to who disagree that, you know, these types of habits and patterns, etc., are not, evidential and obvious and practiced, is that life is observable and we learn as we go. And of course, there's that whole caveat where it's not all people, it's not all guys, it's not all women, things like that. But there is some things that, like, whatever you want to call them, social norms or, habits that people do that are pretty much ironclad. It's pretty obvious that most guys like tits, most guys like ass. You know what I mean? Is that a blanket statement all across the board 100%? No. Some guys are into feet. I'm not into feet. I think that's disgusting. But some guys are into feet. And they are feet men and they like to suck toes and they like that more than they like tits and ass. That's a caveat. That's something where, probably most guys aren't into that. There's always fetishes and there's always people who are, what do they call them? Sapiosexuals, where they're into people who are, they're turned on by people who are intellectual and all these things. All these things that are basically, um, you know, rare, but they're not out of the question, right? So when it comes to observable behavior or empirical evidence, most people can agree on it. Most people can be like, yeah, that's true because I've experienced it. And then somebody else say, yeah, that's true. I've experienced that too. And why do people say things like girls friend zone nice guys? Why is this such a common thing for people to say? Because it's true. Because that's what happens when you're too nice. That's what happens when you have low status and you don't come across, like you're an alpha, or you don't come across like you have high value, right? This is something that is happening in society. These are things that are happening socially, and they're not illegal. They're not, you know, unlawful or go against the Constitution, but they're things that are, one could make a case that they're harmful. One can make a case that they are immoral. One can make a case that they don't actually benefit anybody. And that's one of the cases that I've been making, and that is that because of female biology, they choose guys who have high status, they choose guys who have good finances, right? They don't choose based on classic loving morals. Or, and I wouldn't say morals is the wrong word, classic loving Ethics is a better word, but I want to say classic, loving values, right? Values is a good word because what is it that we value? What is it that women value when it comes to men? What is it that society values when it defines men? Right? What are the things that men are categorically defined as that are valuable in society? If we look at those things and we say, are these things right? Are these things wrong? Are these things good descriptors of men? Are these things that men, it's honorable and good and right for men to live up to these particular values? Okay. And this is one of the keystone things that in my vlogs and in my following mgtow, I want to challenge these values. I want to challenge the perception of, particularly in Western society, the perception of what a man is, the perception of what a man does, of how a man carries himself in society. And I think that it's foul because it's centered around his ability to be a facilitator of, material things, his finances, his social status. These things are revered and honored in Western society because they're centered around success. And I believe at the core of all these things, what it really comes down to is we have a society in the West that is obsessed with advancement. It's obsessed with competition. It's obsessed with winning. It's obsessed with victory. If you look at things socially and you look at things even politically, if you look at things like that, what our presidents, our presidents are somebody that we hold to almost the highest possible standard. Okay, there's very little elbow room at all for a president of the United States, for instance. He almost can't be a normal person. He's such, his moral standard, his social standard, his standard of success, his standard of knowledge is astronomical. And which is part of the reason why I think Donald Trump is so interesting, because he is somebody who's different. Of course, you have the oddballs and the you know, opposites of that, which is somebody like George Bush. And when we just say what was our entire country thinking electing this guy twice, he probably has an IQ of barely above 70. You would think by listening to this guy talk, and you just realize, well, I mean, that's a whole different story. Conspiracy theories. His dad was the his dad was the president, but his dad was also the runner of the administrator of the CIA or whatever craziness. I don't want to get into that, but you have to understand, like, our society is obsessed and hell bent on success. We uplift anybody who, why do you think it's like a guy in a suit is like this statement that he's ambitious and he's forward thinking and he wants to be successful because success is what gets pussy wet. But why? You know what I mean? Why are our values for men? And I think that it's biology on the one hand. Women are biologically attracted to successful men. But I also think that it's social norms that back this up. I think in other cultures, women are content with having a man who treats them right. They're just content with having a man who is fair to them and loves them and treats them right. But in our culture, in the West, we have this kind of provider relationship. where the guy is the provider and the woman is the recipient of whatever he provides. And she gives him in return honor and love. And her honor and love is only, you know, it's only activated and it's based on his ability to quote unquote be a man. And this definition of what is a man, it's somebody who is successful. It's somebody who gets up every day and works hard. And I'm not knocking that. I'm not saying everybody needs to be like the Big Lebowski and just float through life, you know, from weird job to weird job and barely have any money. That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm saying that, you know, why is it that a man is only a man when he works hard and he says, I mean, like, that is crazy if you think about it, because what is that really? It's just the ability to follow a schedule. It's the ability to stay in line, not get out of line. The ability to be consistent every day, to do some type of, and what are these jobs that all these people are doing? Are these jobs like enriching? Are they artistic? Are they helping anybody? I mean, the way you have to question everything. You have to question the way the world is run. You know, everything, you have to question all of it. How the entire world is set up like a business, how goods and materialism is packaged, marketed, sold, and consumed. And you have to look at the entire way we live in our society. It's all centered around business. It's all centered around profit. It's all centered around making money. That's the values of this earth for humans. And I'm not saying that's the only value. I'm saying that is the proliferated value. That is the propagated value. That is the encouraged and marketed value of human life. Consumption, consumers, buy, get a better this, get a better that, get a better car, get a better bed, get a better kitchen, get a better refrigerator, get better, etc., etc., etc. And I like those things. I like having better stuff. I like having a better car. I like having a better, etc., right? But if those are your only values in life, then you got big problems. And I think that most people don't have much more values than that. I don't think people have the time or the energy to work on being better people. I don't think people have the upbringing where they were taught values, where they were taught what love is, where they were taught how to love somebody, where they were taught how to be kind to other people, where they were taught egalitarianism, equality, real equality, not this immoral, passive aggressive dipsy-do that the liberal left is trying to push on everybody, which is really just, you know, they're feigning this equality fight, and what they're really trying to do is they're just trying to push immorality. They're really just trying to push homosexuality and basically just degeneracy. That's really what they're doing. I mean, I'm not saying there's not a lot of people on the left who really believe in equality and who really believe in, you know, real freedom and people having freedom of choice. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine if you want to be gay or whatever. But what I don't like is when you try to force that on society. If somebody thinks being gay is degenerate, that's their right. But the left wants to come in and say, no, you can't think that way. If you think, you're a bigot and I'm going to punch you. I mean, but anyway, I mean, that, you know, that's a different story, but I'm saying that's an example of some anti-values being pushed, anti-value being sold as value. It's valuable to expose children to homosexuality because it conditions them to grow up to be accepting of other people. Well, that's nonsense. It conditions them to be to be degenerate, meaning they don't need to have any semblance of morality. They can just pick and choose who they want to have sex with, as opposed to letting them, not putting them in an environment where they're exposed to experimentation. Rather giving them a normal child, quiet, calm, safe environment that they can grow up in. If they just so happen to hit 14, 15, and instead of developing feelings for girls, the boys develop feelings for other boys, then hey, maybe they really are genetically homosexual. But if they're molested, or if they're, exposed and encouraged to, have homosexual sex or have homosexual experimentation, or if they're given some rhetoric that it's okay to mess around with another boy, then they experiment, and then they're confused, and then they think they are gay and they're really not, or you know what I mean? So I'm not okay with that. But if you hit the age and you really just love men, hey, that's your deal. Don't push it on kids. You know what I mean? This is the society that we're living in now, where, you've got this anti-normality, anti-moral, values coming from the left. And then we have a greater society where everything is centered around producing goods, producing money, money is power. I mean, what do we really worship in the West? We worship money. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not saying people shouldn't have jobs. I'm not saying people shouldn't work and take care of their bills and take care of their health and get nice things. That's all great. But if those are your only goals, then we have problems. If those are your only values, then we have big problems. And what I see is, like I said, empirical evidence. What I see is women choosing men based on this social norm that what we worship is money, what we worship is materialism. I see women choose men. Yes, they choose bad boys when it comes to sex and messing around, and when they're in this loose phase of their life, and even they want the bad boy to settle down. I mean, why is there all these theories that are just guys constantly know? Because this is how women choose. Because this is empirical evidence. They want the bad boy to settle down with, but chances are it's not going to work out. Then they settle down with the second best, which is the beta guy who's got the money, or just the guy who has money. They'll go for the guy who has the money. Why? Because they want security to raise a child, yes. But that's not the only thing. There's plenty of women who are single mothers who work and raise children, take their children to daycare every day. That's not uncommon in this day and age. What it really is what we value in society, what we value in the Western world of capitalism. And I'm not saying capitalism is wrong per se. Maybe the type of capitalism that we institute is wrong because it's sick, I think. The standard is really high, and people are too busy trying to pay their rent, to socialize or treat each other nice or speak to each other, tell each other stories, develop bonds with each other. This is not how our society works. So what's a real man in the Western world? A real man is somebody who makes a good income. A real man is somebody who's powerful in the sense that he has money and he can go on trips and he can take a woman out to a restaurant. He can buy her things that she needs or things that she just wants. Right? And so what I see is, in addition to women wanting bad boys and all these things, the bad boy doesn't have to be. He just has to not go by the rules. But when a guy gets to be in the provider role, in a sense, she hits a come up. In a sense, she is at a higher level because the bad boys, they mess around, whatever, and take one, lose one, here, there, everywhere, right? But the guy with money, he's rare. He's different. He's adult. He's able to take care of himself. He's not living at home with mommy. He's on a higher level. And then the guy who is even on the higher level, he's the boss. He's the guy who is in charge of other guys. He's the guy who has power. And this is sexy to women because this is what we admire in society. The alpha male. He's the guy who's the most successful. He's the guy who's the provider. He can provide for a family. This is what women want. But it's not in any kind of moral value system. It's not in any type of genuine love. One of the best definitions of love is actually in the Bible, 1 Corinthians. I believe it's 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Love is patient. Love is kind, right? We all know that. It's read. It's spoken very common at weddings. Easy to find that quote. We all should know that quote by now. It's a very good definition because it describes a sort of selfless love. There's a selfishness in wanting somebody for what they can do for you, wanting somebody because you're proud of them for you. I'm so proud of you. How you hear that all the time from women, right? Who that their husband is successful. I'm so proud of you. And it's all centered around their ego. Why are they proud of the guy? They're proud of the guy because they're the girl who has the successful man. But I challenge the definition of that. Is that love? Is it really love to base your affection on your man's ability to succeed and your man's ability to accomplish things, to have accomplishments? Is that really love? Or is he kind of like your token? Is he kind of like you're living vicariously through him? Your self-esteem is built up through him. It's sort of plastic when you really think about it. It's transient. Well, what if he stops being successful? What if he loses his job? Are you still going to love him in the same way? You still going to be proud of him? Real love is I'm proud of you no matter what you do because I love you. I don't even like that word pride so much. I like that old adage, pride goes before a fall. I like that. I don't like prideful people very much because it has to do with the ego. And the ego is it's off-putting. Who wants to be around somebody who's just selfish and so they're narcissistically arrogant? I don't like people like that. I like people who are humble, down to earth. They care about you, but it's hard to find people like that in this day and age because we reward arrogance. Look at our movies. Look at our popular culture. Look at our music. What do we reward? Gregarious, over the top, preposterous almost, cockiness. I mean, I hate to use this guy, but look at Kanye West. I know he's a Christian and I know he's misunderstood, but look at Kanye West, somebody who is so cocky and supremely egotistical that they would go on a talk show, or they would, and just act like they're the absolute shit, and like they can do no wrong, and call yourself Picasso or call yourself Rembrandt, like, who would do that? Would Leonardo da Vinci call himself a god? Probably not. I mean, someone might pull up some quote and be like, "Oh yeah, Leonardo da Vinci said we're all gods, and he's a god too." I don't know, but think about the person that you respect the most. Think about somebody who you hold reverence to. Probably that person. A lot of the reason why you hold that person in such high reverence is because that person is humble. At least that's how I am. I like people who are self-effacing, who self-amuse, who don't take themselves too seriously. When you get into this egotistical narcissism, even if you have, well, like somebody like Michael Jordan, right? He's pretty humble. I think Michael Jordan's pretty humble. I think it's hard because I think there's a fine line between confidence, supreme confidence, and arrogance. And he can cross over into that arrogance line at times. But I think he's pretty good. Or at least he puts on a good front. Okay, when he comes across somewhat humble, he talks about fundamentals, he talks about the foundation of hard work, perseverance, and these things he preaches in some of his videos. Okay, I know in his personal life he's a gambler, and I know in his personal life he's said some things that are, have gotten out in the past, but I respect at least the persona that he puts on, because I think he knows there's a lot of kids who are watching him, and at least he's trying to, you know, water down his message to at least make himself look humble, at least make himself look like he has a good character. I think that these characteristics of a man are humbleness and conviction and the quality, these qualities of being down to earth and kindness. I think they're highly underrated, and they're highly under promoted, and they're highly under taught in our society. We're taught to win by any means necessary, even if you have to cheat. We're taught to, uplift yourself and brag about yourself. And who are we taught this by? We're taught this by who is successful. You know what I mean? These people who are successful, they're the ones who teach us how to be assholes, because that's how they act, and people worship them for that. The humble guy is not respected or revered in society. He's not uplifted. It's something that is undervalued. So at the end of the day, women are crucial to us as men. Women are crucial to us in society. Women are crucial to society because they should be facilitators of good quality men. But if they're choosing the wrong type of men, then they are failing at something that is really important. It's important for them to choose quality men, because quality men are going to produce quality children. Quality children are going to grow up to be quality citizens, you see. So if they're choosing guys based on only their ability to make money, only their ability to provide, and they're ignoring qualities such as kindness, humbleness, conviction of character, courage in the face of obstacles, and endurances. I think somebody who's a wonderful example, somebody who's famous but gets swept under the rug, and he's controversial. A wonderful example is Malcolm X. Tremendous opposition, tremendous circumstantial, resistance. Martin Luther King too, but Martin Luther King was a bit more on the quiet side, so it's hard to really pin his personality down. He's more of an introvert, I think. Malcolm X was somebody who he exuded humbleness in the midst of his obvious gifted intellect. He could stand up and speak and say wonderful, wonderful things, but he would never come across as arrogant or prideful or cocky. He was confident in his ability because he knew what he could do, and he had practiced what he could do as an orator and as a speaker, but he was not arrogant. And maybe it had to do with his religion somewhat, but if you have a religion that is teaching you tenets of character, then if you're following those character tenets, that's great. If you when you get into fanaticism, when you get into things that aren't really quantifiably beneficial, then that's when a religion gets to be where it's like, well, what's it really doing? Or, you know what I mean? How are you really helping? Of course, you get into mysticism and metaphysical spiritual growth that's not quantifiable, and that's something that if it can't be measured in reality, then maybe it's not as beneficial as you might think, or maybe it's beneficial between you and God, but it's not something that we can obviously see, right? So I'm not going to sit back and be like, oh, well, he was a Muslim, so I discredit everything that they taught him, or I discredit everything that he represented as far as that goes. Well, maybe he learned some good things from that religion, as far as if it taught him how to be humble, if it taught him how to be a better man, then I'm okay. I've read the Quran and I don't see any of that in there, but maybe I'm missing out some parts, or maybe there's some things that are being taught that aren't in the Quran that are actually kind of good character building practices. But if you look at somebody who's a good example, I'm saying, look at Malcolm X. There are examples, but they tend to get overshadowed by people with large egos. For some reason, we love Tom Cruise and we don't love Malcolm X. For some reason, we love Arnold Schwarzenegger and we don't love Malcolm X. You see what I'm saying? So there's people who get ignored. There's good men who get ignored because they're not as marketable to our lower sensibilities. Yeah, I love watching Arnold shoot up an army. I love watching Tom Cruise, ride a motorcycle and do stunts and all this craziness that we see in movies, right? That's great. But is there any value to humanity in that? Is there any value to us personally in that? There's not. Not really. Kill your opposition, be stronger, more cooler, be buffer. What is that? You're just teaching people to be in competition with one another. That's not helping anybody, really. It might help you to look cool. You might get laid. Well, great. But then what? How are you helping society? How are you helping your fellow man? How are you enriching your family's life, by acting like a badass? You're not. How are you enriching, your community by walking around in a leather jacket? Like, it's cool, good for you, man. You got a leather jacket on, you got buff or whatever, like that's awesome. But what about your fellow citizens? We don't teach egalitarianism. We don't teach quality character examples, and women don't reward men for those things. So men don't have them. It's science, man. It's empirical evidence. It's nature. If a species, if there's a necessity for something in a species, that species will adapt. If women start choosing men who are good men, good quality men, faithful men, loving men, loyal men, kind men, humble men, right? All these good characters, men with conviction, men who have courage in the face of obstacles, men who are loving, right? All these, expressions of quality. Then other guys will catch on and say, oh, I need to be a better guy, because women are choosing, the quality good women are choosing these good men. But instead, what are women choosing? They're choosing the rich guy. They're choosing the guy who's famous. They're choosing the guy who has social status. They're choosing the guy who has social pull. They're choosing the guy who other women want. They're choosing the bad boy. They're choosing all these things based on this biology that says, oh, I got to get the best guy. And what's the best guy in a society like this? It's a guy who gets to the top by any means necessary. It's a guy who makes money and that's all he's good for. They might love each other. They might have emotions toward one another, but are they really, you know, how is their love? Is their love just pure and honest? And are they pure and honest type people? Or are they just selfish and materialistic? And, you know what I mean? Are they just worshipers of money? Do they care about anything more than themselves and their own family? You know what I mean? So there's so much to talk about here. But I think I've scratched the surface. I think that I've started to really describe and explain, you know, what it is that women look for and why that's a problem and why it's so important that women really need to choose a good guy, why it's so important that guys need to be good, that society needs to reward men for being good. You know, it's something that you don't get points for being a nice guy. You don't get points for being, it's just like nobody cares because they're so caught up in their own thing. So it's a societal problem. It's not just a female problem. It's all of it. And I argue that the females, if society changes what they think is cool and what they think is popular and what they think is hot, if society changes, if women change, and if either one of those change, they'll both affect one another. If women change the way they look at men and choose men, society will change. If society changes the way it looks at men and uplifts men, then women will change, I think. And it will be something that would be progressive and groundbreaking and would be, you know what I mean, a sort of revival of, you know, if you will, of quality in the world. Anyway, I think that's a good start to talk about this. Thank you guys for listening. Jason Levi, Northwest Podcast.